Welcome to Butch's Building Blocks. Let's build something beautiful today. We're going to start out with some hickory and black walnut and design a beautiful cutting board. Now that we've cut this to 5 1/4 inches, this is going to be our highlight piece. We're only going to need 1/4 inch on each side of the black walnut. So I'm going to split this in half. I've already set my fence to rip this right down the middle. Well, as you can see, I messed up on my height a little bit. Still have a small tab in the middle. I'll just come back and recut it, split it in half. After I split this board in half, knowing very well that the sides weren't exactly even, I ran them through my drum sander and took them down to 0.24 inches each. So now I have 2 good faces for gluing when I go to do the glue up. We have our piece of black walnut, which I put through the drum sander and brought it down to 0.75 inches, plus our 2 pieces of hickory. And now we're going to glue these up. Now we've surfaced all 4 sides. We're going to glue them up. Okay, the first thing I'll do is put 2 clamps, a clamp this way to keep it from shifting, and a clamp that way to keep it from shifting before I put my pressure down. Now that I've got my piece so it's not going to shift terribly, we're going to start our vertical pressure on it. Even so, I would be gentle with the clamping pressure until you get enough on there that you're sure that piece is not going to shift sideways. Now that we've got pressure on this and we know these boards aren't going to slip, it's time to get the center. We'll let that dry for a good hour or 2 before we come back to our next step. Now it's time to cut our 45-degree angles. I've set my saw in my fence and I made a center mark and then just eased the blade in to make sure that I was cutting where I wanted to. So now we'll cut both of these sides and then we'll work on the other side. So you've cut them correctly. Should be a nice 45-degree angle. Next thing we need to do is measure the length here to be sure we get exactly 5 inches. When you get done, it should look like this. 45-degree angles on both sides. I've set my stop block for 7/8 of an inch off of my blade. And now we're going to take our stock piece and cut it into sections. We now have our 8 segments, and I'm going to run them through the drum sander to make sure that these sides don't have any saw marks left on them. Now that we've cut our long pieces, we need to fill in with face grain small triangles, 15/16 of an inch from here to there. So I've set my stop block to cut 15/16 of an inch. Now be careful with your grain pattern. You're going to want the grain pattern to go straight into your other pattern. If you have this grain swirling sideways or something, it's going to detract from it. These are the pieces that we need to cut to fit the other side of the leg. I did a test piece. It does need to be 1 15/16 of an inch long. Set my stop block here. Now we're ready to cut. Remember, we cut these filler blocks with the grain going in this direction. I made one with the grain going in a sideways direction. You can see how much this grain detracts from the rest of it, where this is pretty neutral, shall we say, and keeps your eye focused on the end grain. Here's our pattern so far. Looks pretty good. Now we have 3 voids here, and mathematically speaking, this is half of that, so if we put 2 of these together, it should fit in there perfectly. But instead of having it with a split like this, making it harder to glue up, we're just going to cut a square the right size to fit the hole. Okay, we're ready to start gluing up. I built a nice little 90-degree jig. I have a platform suspended in the air so I can get to it a little bit easier. Take one of the sections, set it in there, add a side block, add some pressure, but not too much, because you need to pull this top section down. And now's a question of adding pressure this way and pressure this way, kind of at the same time, until all of your seams have disappeared. Okay, now when I go to glue this up, I'm actually going to use wax paper underneath of it, but in order for you to see how it was done without interference, I thought it was best to do it this way to start. Okay, here's what it looks like with the wax paper on it. I made sure that these pieces fit down in here snugly. I do have a top clamp that's keeping pressure onto it so that it's level. There's my side clamp coming across, and then the top clamp keeping it in place. Comes out pretty nicely, but that's the final crazy clamping configuration. Okay, at this point you should have 4 blocks glued up. 3 of them having the center and the 1 not. Okay. Fit them together, and then you're going to have to do some sanding on these edges to get them to fit as nicely as possible. Once you have all these, we need to glue these 4 together, glue them with long clamps going in this direction, tighten them down in this direction to keep that board from buckling under the pressure. Now we've finished our crossing X pattern, we need to build it out. I've got a piece of scrap maple. It's about the right width. So we'll line it with maple first to isolate the center section. Put another chunk of black walnut on it, and then most likely a wider piece of cherry. I've got 2 out of the 4 sides mitered and gluing. We'll let those sit for about 35 minutes, and then we'll put on the other 2 sides and finish this up. Okay, all 4 sides are now glued on and ready for the next layer to be wrapped around. Here's our cutting board, or serving tray, depending on how you want to use it, with its second wrap of black walnut. The third and final wrap will be cherry. Okay, we're on our final wrap. This is going to be our cherry to match the center portion here. Here's the final buildup of our serving board. The maple border really highlights it nicely compared to the hickory pieces in here and the black walnut. Next thing I have to do is sand it. It's only 220. I like to take it to 320 before I put any oil on it. Our board has been sanded to 320 grit, and now it's time to add cutting board oil to it. That looks very nice. We'll let that soak in and then give her another couple coats to make sure that it's nice and moisturized. Here's our rectangular serving board with the center X pattern. It's come out very nicely. The whiter maple has helped accentuate this intersection here. This is black walnut, the center. It did come out quite a bit darker than I wanted it to because it's end grained, but I still feel it looks pretty good. If you like what I've done, please subscribe to my channel.